is actually like a tree in which the browser has converted our HTML codes. Okay, so now I want you to note that the DOM is not HTML. Okay, sometimes people misunderstand the two terms. Our HTML is the raw text that is in our HTML file. So all those things that we have written, the H1, the image tag, the link, all those syntax, all those tags, all those elements, they are just HTML. Okay, sorry. What is this? Yeah. So sorry. Now, when we write our HTML, so let me share my screen. Again. Okay, so this is our HTML, and this is the our previous project that we've been working with. Okay, so now when we write this in our HTML file, and then when we run this code, or when we serve it over our web server, and the browser requests for it, well, as soon as the code is being downloaded, because the file is going to be downloaded, now this is the output of our code, right? But all these things we are seeing here are not just the HTML, the elements that we specify in this place. Okay, so these things has been passed into what is known as a DOM tree. Okay, so the browser passes our HTML file, creates a tree known as document object model. Okay, so because each of those elements are represented as nodes, okay, so those will be interpreted, and then the browser does this painting because these are like painting on the screen. Okay, so now imagine you open Facebook in your browser. What you see, buttons, text, images, those are not raw HTML file anymore. Okay, so the browser reads the HTML and builds a tree of objects in memory. And this operation that we are explaining happens in the memory. So it happens on the code, right? Now the tree is the document object model. And each thing on the page, sorry, like the buttons and images and paragraph, is represented as an object, okay, that you can inspect. Remember, if you want to inspect this object, you can go to the dev tool and inspect to see all these elements. But the truth is that, well, we are just seeing it as our HTML code, but this has actually been parsed by the browser, and all browsers has the ability to parse an HTML file. Okay. Now think of the DOM as a blueprint, because now you'll be asking yourself, what is this DOM? We have tried to explain it in. So let's explain it in the layman's term. Ask yourself, what is this DOM? Now think of a DOM as building a house. Okay. So before you build a house, first of all, an architect or architect has to draw the building uh, to what is known as a blueprint. Okay. Now that blueprint will be used to build the actual house. So the actual house is a 3D modeling on 3D view of that blueprint, or that drawing on the blueprint. So think of the HTML as the blueprint. So the HTML is more like you are writing your HTML is more like you are specifying how this DOM is going to look like. Okay. So all these things that we've written here in our HTML file are more like a blueprint. So we are saying we need to have a paragraph element here with this text, all this markup. That's what we call it markup language. So we mark up how it's going to look like. Then the browser takes it, passes it, and then renders the content, builds a DOM tree, sorry, first, and then renders the content on the screen. Okay. Now, just like the example I was giving before, blueprints of a house. So HTML is the written blueprints on a paper. Okay, so those blueprints that's been drawn for a building, see HTML as the blueprint. Okay. Now the dome is the real 3D house built from the blueprint. So the real building represents the dome. Okay, that's the document object model. Now, so far, remember our concern in this course is JavaScript. How does JavaScript come into this document object model? Well, see JavaScript as the builder, as the worker. So the workers have the ability to move things around, to paint the house, to wire the building, to install CCTV cameras, to do many other things. In fact, they are the ones building the houses. Okay. So, sorry, give me a minute. Yeah, yeah. Okay, I know. Sorry, sorry, something happened. I had to look into it. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can still hear you.
Okay. So now the builder or the workers in the house are like JavaScript. Okay, so JavaScript has the ability to update anything on the page. In fact, update interact with the DOM. Okay, so you use JavaScript if you want to anything programmatically to do. Remember, all we have been doing so far are just to statically map about the stuff. Right. So what if you want to change this color? Maybe if you want when a user presses a button on the page, we want to change the color of this particular text here, the title, or we want to change something, or we want to, put other stuff like alter this arrangement that we have done so far statically in our HTML. Well, this is what a builder would have done in a building. Okay, so they have the ability to reinstall an already installed window in a building, right? So this is what JavaScript does. So JavaScript gives you the ability to dynamically alter all these things without touching the HTML because you wouldn't want the user to touch the HTML, right? So with JavaScript, you have the ability to talk to the DOM to update anything on the page. Now, let's look at the DOM. So the DOM as a tree. We've already explained that when the browser fetches our HTML file, it builds what is known as a DOM tree, which is a hierarchical representation of all the elements. And I told you guys in our previous classes that um, all those are, in fact, our HTML code already is a representation of the tree data structure. So that's actually what happens then. Okay. Now, let's look at okay, so we have talked about the DOM and also the origin. Now let's talk about DOM manipulation. Well, DOM manipulation, I've actually explained it, is you using JavaScript to alter or to talk to the DOM, to manipulate it, to change what is in the DOM. Okay, so remember when we are learning JavaScript, all we have been learning are other aspects of JavaScript, but so far we haven't learned how to use JavaScript to alter what is in our HTML page. Okay, so today that's what we are going to be looking at, and we are going to be looking at the various ways of altering what is on the page. Now, in order to manipulate anything on this program, give me a minute, please. I mean, say what you want to say. Say what you want to say. Use another color. Like say that color is not available. Say the color is not available. You say the color is not available. And use another color. Okay, so now if we want to select anything on the page, the way we will do that is that there are several ways we can do that. So if you guys remember when we are writing our CSS, when we want to target any elements, we can either use the elements name, which is known as element selector, or we use the class name, which is also known as the class selector, or the ID, which is also known as the ID selector. You can also use the attribute selector, right? So the same concept also applies to JavaScript. Okay, so in JavaScript, there are various ways we can select elements. In fact, those properties we select elements with in CSS are also valid, but with a different approach. Okay, so but before we proceed, right, I want us to learn something that we haven't learned so far, and that is known as objects in JavaScript. So far we've learned about data types, and we learned about native data types, and also user-defined data types. And in user-defined data types, we learned about arrays, we learned about maps, but we didn't talk about objects. We did give an example of an object in a previous class, but we didn't talk about it fully. So now, objects are a way, or like say, a form of representing complex data structure. Okay, or like say complex data. For example, let's say we want to represent an entity person, or it could be a car, or it could be anything, right? Usually, if you want to present a number, we would have used simple integer to represent that number. Maybe create a variable, right? So let's say we want to represent the number 20. Now that 20 could be anything, so we can give it, remember, use a descriptive name to show what that value is. So the value 20, it could be age. So we could say age equals 20, right? Now this is a simple representation of this value. So storing it to this variable 20, and that's simple. It could be name. So we can say let user name, right? It was do, okay, because do, yeah. Now these are simple representation of values. Now when we want to represent a list, we could now say let number, let's say list of numbers, let numbers, right, equals an array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that. Let me just go back, right? Now this is, now if you guys remember that an array is a representation of linear data types. Okay, so it's a linear data structure that stores items of the same types in a linear format. So because this is linear, right? So the arrangement, the order does not matter. Okay, then it can be anyway, but what matters is that everything here, this particular representation is linear. Okay, so it's like a list, and also array makes what use of what is called index. So to locate any particular item from this list, we can use the index of that item in the list, right? So now, not just numbers, it could be things, other things like, let's say, let colors. Okay. So I'm going to use Copilot to scroll. So you can see this is a list of colors, right? So now if you want to access blue, we need to do something like console.log colors at the index of blue is 2, at the index of 2. Okay. So if you go to our page, sorry, there's a problem here. So if we go to our page and open our terminal, we should see blue printed. Okay, you can see that blue is, let me temporarily disable. Okay, this is from my code editor. All right, so let me clear it and load it again. So you can see that I have blue here, right? You can see the blue printed. So if I want to access the first item, now before we proceed, how do I access the first item? Well, the first item is located at index 0. So arrow at 0 index. So you can see red, right? Then this is 1, sorry, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now these are simple data, or will I say, yeah, simple. Let me call it simple data. What if you have something that is complex, something that has properties or attributes? For example, a person or a car or a phone. Now, these objects are complex. Let's say, for example, a person. Now, there's no way I can represent a person like this. But this is a name. Even if I say let John equals John Doe. Well, this is just John's, yeah, John Doe. This is just John's name. What if I want to represent their age? So I will not say let's John's age, John age, or John's age, anyone, 30. Let's John's colors like this. Then I could not say let's John's John eye color. Now this is really bad. Okay, this is really this. In fact, all these things are independent variables. They are not the same. This is not the same with this, and it's also not the same. So these are independent variables. What is the best way to store this kind of data when you have the complex data? Well, that is where an object comes in. Now here is how to create an object. So we start with let's person equals. Now to create an object, use the curly braces. We have an opening and closing curly brace. Okay. Now you must use an opening and curly brace. Now inside of the curly braces, you specify the attributes of your object. So here we are creating a person. So now we can start putting all this on. So we can say first name. Now the attributes also follow the same rule as variable naming. So first name could be John, okay, last name could be Doe, and then age. Now each property must be separated with a comma. Now I want to show you something. I'm putting everything in one line, okay. I could put everything here. First name, John. Copilot should just stop this. Let me do this. First name, John. Right. Now, last name by this would be Joe. Okay. Now, age would be 40. Right. Now, also, when you're creating an object, you make use of what is known as key value pairs. So after specifying your opening and closing curly braces, when you type the key name, you end it with a colon followed by the value. You must specify the value, and then you end that value with a colon, sorry, a comma. Now, this comma signifies that this is one key value pair. This is one key value pair. So the key is this, and the value is John. Okay. Now you can now put the next one. Remember, after the key name, put a colon and then the value. Okay. Now you also put the next one. So now there is no limit to how many key value pairs you can have. You can have as many as you want. Okay. In fact, you can have as even thousands. Just it's unlimited, right? So we can keep going. We can even give address of John, right? Address, we can write something like this, right? So this is an address of John, and we can also have something like city, any town, state, CA, zip code. So Copilot is helping us to suggest some top key value pairs based on what we have. Okay. Now this is getting long. Now the more I keep having these keys, it's getting long. Now, if I have Prettier installed, Prettier should automatically format this when I save. So it formats it and keeps it on a new line. So usually this is the best way to represent this. So now it is easier for you to understand. So you have key value, key value, key value, key value, key value, right? Now also you don't have to specify the data type of the key. So the key can have any data type. In fact, the key can also be an object. So in JavaScript, you can also nest object inside of another object. The same way you can also nest array inside of an array. Okay. For example, let's say now that we have strings and then number. Let's add a Boolean value here. So we can have is married, right? This is 40, should be true. So you can see these things now. You can see hobbies. Now the hobbies is now an array, right? So you have an array of what the hobbies are. Now we can also have objects. So we can say preferences, right? Of course, Copilot is so smart. Now, once I put a column, I can now use the same concept again of using curly braces to generate the object. So we also follow the same thing. So these are simply objects. So this preference here is an object, right? That is inside of the person object. Okay. Now we can also have a function as a key, right? So a key can also be a function. Let's say call. Let's say we give this person a call. Okay, call. A call attribute. So we can now one thing you need to understand is that in an object, the function must be an anonymous function. It cannot have a name. Remember when we treated functions, we talked about anonymous functions that don't have a name. So this is where arrow function also comes in. But in some cases, you might want to use function declaration. Okay, so the reason is because, for example, let's say John has a phone number, right? We didn't put that. We say email. Let's add his email. Okay, right. Now let's add his email. john.doe@gmail.com. I just said that's what his email is. And then last add the phone number. So let's say this is phone number. Now we can have a method that simulates calling. So this method could, right? So this method could be an anonymous function. So once again, let me use Copilot to quickly complete it. So what's happening here is that we created a function, an anonymous function, that inside of that function, we are doing return calling this dot first name. You guys remember when what we said this is already when I hover on this, you can see that this represents this entire object, which is the person. And I told you that this refers to where it is being used. So this now represents this person object, not the function itself. Remember we said that this keyword is a very complex keyword to understand, because if this is being used in a function, then it will imply that the function is the this, right? But since it's being used in an object, so it is the global object itself, which is the parent object. It's not this function. It could have been this function, but no, it is this object. In fact, IntelliSense is already telling us what this is. When I hover on it, I can see that it is this entire object itself. Right? You can see it here, this, then column. So this is the entire object. Okay. Now, um, pilots also question. Okay. Now we have created the null properties of this person. So now let's assess all these properties. To do first of all, do console.log person. Okay. Now, if I go to my browser, you can see this thing that logs here. If I open it, you can see all the properties that we have. Except the function be called. The call is a function, so it's represented as L. So there's no value that's true. Okay. But other things are being displayed, like the address, the age, then the first name, the hobbies, the is married, last name. So now, if you want to access any particular property from this person. Let's say we are working, we just want to check the age. Okay, so we can actually do, you can even do something here. You can actually perform some kind of operation that we want. But let's say we want to access the hobbies, so we can do dot hobbies, right? If you just want to access the hobbies, then you can see only the hobbies is being displayed. Remember, this is known as the dot operator. If you don't want to use the dot operator, you can also use the bracket notation by putting it in a string and then call the name of that, key that you are looking for, right? You must type it in a string, and you also see the same thing. There's no error. You can see it here. Okay. Now, let's say you want to log, the preferences. So you can say person dot preferences. Okay. Now this will give you that object, that preferences object. You can see, which is just this newsletter and notifications. Okay. Now, so here is it. Now, finally, let's call the call. Let's call that function inside of that place. So you can do person.call. This person.call will now simulate calling. So right now we are not passing any parameters, so we don't need to pass anything. We'll do person.call. So if you go to the console, you can see calling John Doe at 555 blah 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 blah. So I don't know if you see what's happening here. So if you are building an application that's a calling application on the web. So this is how you would do it. Okay, so when you do person.call, it will take the person's phone number and then start calling that person. Okay, so this is how you would do that, right? Am I too fast? Am I too fast? Are you guys understanding me? Are you guys still hearing me?
I can hear you.
Okay, okay, nice. Okay, so now, do you guys have any question or should we proceed?
I think we should proceed.
Huh? Okay, we should proceed. But you guys understood everything that we've been saying so far, right?
Yes, I understood this.
Okay, all right. No problem. Now, why did I want to talk about objects, right? Why do I want to talk about objects? Well, that's because remember we said that the DOM is an object, okay? So so here we have the person, which is like this object. The same way is also how the document is also represented internally. Not that we don't create it by ourselves; it's already been created, right? Because some of the things we'll be doing this thing that we did here. These dots, person dot this, person at blah blah blah, this person dot com. So if you see us doing some dot operation, then you not be asking yourself, what is that dot com? Where did it come from? So that's what I want you to understand this concept because we are going to be making reference to it. Okay, so that's it. You guys understand what I just explained? Nobody responded.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, all right. Now, internally, there's this thing known as the document. Okay, and the document it's a large, giant object. Notice, see how as I emphasize on it, is a giant object that contains a whole lot of things. Now, this object also just ignore me. Okay. Also, um, this thing we did here also can also be done with class instantiation. So, but we did not talk about class in JavaScript, okay? Now, whenever you create an HTML page, when the browser loads that page and passes and creates the DOM inherits, or will I say that property, that HTML inherits that object, okay, inherits some properties, some functions that you can call on them automatically, okay? Now we're going to look at those examples, for example, in the moment. So, give me a minute, sorry. So just give me a minute, please. Okay, sorry about that. I had to settle something. Okay, now so far we created our person object here, right? But that document that I'm talking about is already been created. We don't create it ourselves, so we can easily access it because it is a global object. So we can easily do something like these documents. At the moment you type document, so here is another thing. You should avoid using document to name something like this. Don't say document equals to something like this. Now, this will cause a conflict because the reason is because when you try to access these documents, you'll be finding it difficult to differentiate it from the actual documents, right? So, in fact, that global document might be conflicting with yours. Do you understand? Do you guys understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
I
sir.
don't know what
Okay. So now we have learned this. Let's now start manipulating our documents with JavaScript. Hence, document object model manipulation. That's DOM manipulation. Now, first of all, let's see what we can change from JavaScript. Okay, I'm going to close this for now. Right. Let's see what we can change. Okay, let's change this particular H1. Or in fact, let's change all the H1 in our page. Right. Now, there are various ways to, let me type it, ways of selecting elements in DOM. So you can see Copilot is very smart to know what I'm typing. So ways of selecting elements in the DOM, one is by ID. Yes, that's correct. Which is this, which is already what is there. Let's just say const H1. Now the thing is that we have to give that element we want to select an ID. Remember, I said the same concept or the same way we select using CSS. That's also the same way we select in JavaScript, but with a different approach. Still the same concept. For example, we want to select this particular H1. Okay, so we have to actually give it an ID. Now, this is the only H1 here, so it wouldn't make sense if we just use ID, but it still makes sense to use ID, right? But you can actually select only this span. So let's give this span an ID. So we give it an ID of, let's say, H1 span like this. Okay. Now in our JavaScript, we cannot call it span. Okay. We now say Now, here's the thing. We select the elements using documents, using if for the ID selector, we do document dot get element by ID. Get elements, sorry, elements by ID. Now, this is a function. This is a function that is inside. Remember when we did person.call, but just that our person.call did not accept any parameter. That doesn't mean that we can't create the one that can accept parameters or arguments, okay? But here, this one needs an argument. This document.get element by ID, because the document contains all these elements, all of them. So we want to select a specific one. In fact, each of them might contain an ID, but we don't know the one. But when we take the JavaScript to go to the document and call the get element by ID and pass the ID of the element you want to select. So in our own, we want to, I don't know how this thing knows. Okay, I think it's using context to know that that's the name. So H1 span, like this. The moment we do H1 span, this here, this expression here will return to us that particular element that contains this ID. If you want to verify it, let's log this to the console to see, right? So I'm going to move it by selecting all of them and dragging it into that place. I have to remove that semicolon inside. Now, if I save, now watch if I go to my browser, inspect again. You'll be surprised to see if I go to the console. Can you see that the span was locked to the console? Right? See this span. Let's go to our page and confirm. Let's check our HTML file. Look at our HTML file. This is the span, right? And it contains this house plus another span inside of it. So we have span inside of span. This is called nesting. Okay. Now, this span, if everything as it is being returned to us here, the raw HTML, the raw DOM is being returned. Okay. Now, that is why we have to store it in a variable. Remember what variables are. So you can store it in a variable and then use it to do whatever I want to do, such as manipulating that particular element. So we can do const, we don't have to use let, okay? Let's just do const span equals to this. So of course, if I have on it, it will just tell you here. Now this actually contains, sorry, this is console. Let's remove this console. So if I hover on it, if I hover on this span, you can see the type HTML elements or not. Now the truth, you know why this thing is symbolized? Okay, this is not TypeScript course, don't worry. But this could be none. The reason why it could be none is if the ID we pass here does not exist, then null will be returned. So this function is going to return null, meaning nothing. Okay. Now, I think we haven't talked about the meaning of null. So far, we have talked about undefined and which other one we talked about? I said undefined is when you are trying to access a variable that does not exist. That's an undefined will be thrown, right? But there's one again, undefined. No, there's another one, right? So yeah, but null means nothing. Yes, you couldn't find the elements we are looking for. So this get element by ID. You can also read about it by clicking on this MDN reference. So you can see the overview of what it does. It says returns the first element within nodes descendant whose ID is element ID. So this returns the first node, right? The first element, sorry, within nodes descendants, right? And I told you that those in the DOM, those elements are known as nodes, okay? Because that's the tree. What is created is called DOM tree, okay? So this is it. So now we can either log this part or do something. In fact, I want to change the color. So I can now say span dot. Now I can't just say span dot color. That is invalid. If I say span dot color equals red, let's check. I'm not sure that's valid, but let's check. So nothing happens. So you can see nothing happens. Why? Why nothing happens is because span dot color is invalid, right? So what we want to manipulate anything that has to do with styles in JavaScript, we actually don't have to do it as if JavaScript has a way of changing styles. No, what we need to do is to manipulate the style of that element, the CSS. So yes, CSS can be controlled with JavaScript, right? So what we need to do is to manipulate. Let me make this a full screen so we can see what we're doing here. So what I need to, this is actually showing it. So you might not notice the difference. Let me put it to blue. Okay. So you can still see nothing happens on the page. And our span is this one here, right? Now, what we need to do to change this color here is actually the CSS. So to alter the CSS, we have to do span.style. Now remember that all these elements have these proper attributes, right? Yes, so attributes can be accessed. Remember, each element is like a tree. Sorry, it's like an object inside of the DOM. So which means they all have these attributes as properties, just as we created the person, and the person has first name, last name, all those properties that we are defining. Yeah, so the element have all these their attributes as the properties in diagram, okay? Because the element is like an object. So we cannot be style. Remember the style property. Remember the first time when we learned CSS, the very first thing we learned is inline CSS. And to do inline CSS, we do it by using the style, okay? Then we start writing whatever I want to write. So that is what we actually need to manipulate. So we now do dot style. Now when we do dot style, this style is also an object because those CSS value attributes, right, are all properties and their values. So they are aligned. Remember when we are writing CSS, if you look at our CSS file, so this is more like an object if you look at it very well. Okay. The only difference is that these are known as statements. Okay. So you write these styles, you write and you end it with a semicolon, but actual objects you end it with a comma, not semicolon. Okay. So these properties you are seeing here are all attributes. Sorry, they are all properties, attributes in the JavaScript style. Okay, so the style is like an object, but there is a difference. Now the difference is these ones that have hyphen will be removed. This hyphen here will be removed and replaced with camel case notation. Let me show you. Camel case name is a one notation. So for example, what we want to change is the color. So we can now do dot color. Okay. Now when we save and we go to the page, you can see that this has changed to blue. If you want to verify, let's change that color to something else. Let's say orange and save. You can see it is orange. But why is this one not working? Why is this pan not working? Well, that is because unlike CSS that will have what is known as specificity, because this one uses inline styling. Now, this I want you to also note that what we have done is inline styling. So if you inspect this page, we are going to see that this particular span has an inline style because JavaScript actually changes. You can see it here. That particular span here highlighted, you can see it here. This is the span and this is the ID we gave it. Now you can see this property style, okay, color orange, right? But if you go to our HTML file, we don't have such. It's not going to show you, but directly in the browser, we have altered the DOM to reflect these changes. So that's why you have this property here showing, and it's going to remain here. It's permanent, right? Of course, when you refresh, even if you refresh the browser, it's still there because this thing happens in runtime. Okay, so it's still there, right? So this also JavaScript, because it's inline CSS, because you remember inline CSS is more powerful than external CSS. So that is why the color was able to apply. Okay. Now, if you want to select the next, that is the child of that color, that is the child span. So we can actually do span dots. Now here, we want to select. Now, so far we talked about ID selector. Okay, before we proceed to the next one, I want us to talk about the next selector. So this is how to select with an ID, right? So what we want to select by ID, we have to give that element an ID. Okay, so the element must have an ID before you use that element by ID. Okay, otherwise it's not gonna work. Now the next one is known as class name. Well, I'm going to use Copilot and I'm going to specify what's happening here. Now, the by class name, we are selecting by class name, get elements by class name, instead of get element by ID. Now we now use get elements by class name, elements by class name, and we pass the class name. Now notice something here. I want you guys to notice something. Unlike CSS, we use the hash to select IDs. We use hash to select ID, then we use dot to select color, right? But here, because this is a special method for ID, you don't need to put the hash like this. If I save this and go to the page, you see that didn't work. That's because the hash that we put there, we just added there, is actually treated as a string. So we don't need to put the hash. So because this is a special method or function, okay, that's reserved for selecting IDs. So it's going to look for IDs, the element, the ID attribute on that element. Okay, but it's DOM. The ID attribute, the element with this ID in the entire DOM. Okay. And also this get element by ID returns the very first element. So that means if you have two elements with the same ID, the very first one, because I think it's called John Traversal, it's going to start from top. The very moment it hits the one with this value, it's going to return that one. Even though that is not the one you're targeting. That's why we don't advise using ID is meant to be unique. Okay, so no two elements can have the same ID. That's a convention, and you must adhere to it. Now, for get element by class name, you also do the same thing. You don't do dots colored. No, just pass the class name. Now, this, of course, this Copilot have access to this context, that's the project context. So it was able to know that this span has another span nested that has the class name, the class colored. So that's why it's automatically it figured out that we wanted to select that one. So yes, but this is actually how we select. So cons colored elements equals document of get elements by class name, then you pass. So let's hover and say the get element by class name method of all child elements which have all of the given class name. This is more like a typo. The get elements by class name method of all child elements which have all of the given class names. So but anyway, this just returns this one. So this you can now change it. Okay, so here's the thing. Okay, so here's the thing. This colored element, this get element by elements by class name. You notice this as there, get elements by class name. Well, unlike the get element by ID, this one returns a list. So if we hover on these colored elements, we can see that this thing is known as the HTML collection of. So this is a list. So we can actually do the same thing we did here. So we can do let's log it to the console and see what's inside. Okay. Now let's go to my console to see what we have here. Like I see HTML collection, then we'll have span.color. So for now we only have one. Okay, so now if we want to alter the color of that element, we can actually do this. Sorry, what am I doing? Colored elements dot style. We can't do this. You can see that we are not. This will not work. Let me show you what Copilot is also telling me. This will not work as get element by class name returns an HTML collection. Now this collection is like a list. It looks like an array. Okay, we need to look through the collection to apply style to each element. So now the reason why it returns the list is because classes, more than one element can have the same class name, because classes are actually meant for grouping. So you use classes to group things. Okay, the same way, because the same concept applies everywhere. So when you, of course, you say this thing belongs to a particular class. Okay, so this group of things they belong to this particular class. So that's why in our HTML. Remember, I think here we have this section. We have this also. We have this section services. We also think there's a place we have very unique um, class name. Yeah, this icon. So we have this .fas. So yeah, they all have the same, almost at least this class name to indicate their class. Okay. So in order to apply this qualify, let me save it. Let's check. Nothing happens. Okay. Not this is marked as red. Let's do something new. Save it. Nothing happens. This is our page, and nothing happened. This is actually the particular one we want to change the color. So in order to change that color, what we need to do is this, right? We need to, let's see. What we need to do is to use, we'll look through this element. So we can say for, let's, I think we did not talk about loops in JavaScript. Let I equals to 0, then I is less than or equal to colored element. Let me just use this in I plus plus. Then inside of that loop, we are now going to apply individual elements, and this will work according to Copilot. Okay. And if we go there, we can see that colored elements are start at color equals to 3. And what is this? Okay, let me remove this part. So this one is showing. Okay, yeah, you can see it work now. So that initial one was throwing an error. Uncut cannot support us to perform the setting column. Okay. This is because let's just be like this. Okay, that should be installed again. All right. So now, okay, I think it's that one. If you save it, yeah. So you can see that we have this green. But what's happening here is that this is a list, so we must go through. But there's a better way to do this. You just want to select one, right? Now, the next one is the next pattern. Apart from this class name, there's also another pattern, which is by tag name. Okay. Now, the tag name is very simple. So remember in CSS, we can also select by the element name. So that's when we can do this this h2, not dot, sorry. And also we don't use the tag, don't put all these left angle brackets, just the element name we use. So that's also here. That also applies here. So this here returns divs, document don't get elements by tag name. Now this also returns a collection. Okay. You also do the same thing that we did here, but this one is for, let me show you. I'm going to look through the whole divs in our page and apply this particular style you see here, right? This style is actually, this is a loop, right? Then inside of this place, I'll really explain what this thing is doing here. So what happened here is that on each iteration, we are going to take that list and then use the index of that particular current loop. So the element on the current loop, or like the current iteration. So when I is 0, the element in the 0 is going to apply the color green. So when I is 1, the element on index 1, just like that until the end of the list. Same thing here. So we do, first of all, selected all the divs in our page. So now do when I left I was 0, so here the group long ones, and then the I on the first iteration, the I is still 0. So the element on the index 0 is going to take this style. Then after the whole the next condition, after this condition, the next condition will be evaluated, which is an I must be less than divs of length, which means the condition is that so long as I is less than the length of the list, right, then increment I by 1. So after that, we now apply this. We do it again. So long as the number I is not higher than the length of the divs, apply this on the item on that particular position. So if you save this and go to our page, see what happens. All the divs in our page gets a black color. Let me exit full screen. See all the divs on our page get this black border color. You can see that, right? Are you guys following? Do you guys need any? I hope nobody has raised hand. Yeah, yeah, nobody raised hand. So you guys understanding everything, right? Okay, that's nice. Yes, sir. Okay, that's nice. So that is it for this one. There's another way of selecting something, which is by query selector. Yes, this is the last one I want to show you something. Now remember these ones now. I want to select this color, but because we can't just run this simple, write this simple code, like this simple line of code, we have to first look through it. That is because we are using this. What if you just want to select that one with color? Because we know that it's only one element that has this color. Well, that's where query selector comes in. Now, the query selector is a combination of these three. The query selector is the combination of these three. Okay. So what the query selector does is you specify exactly what you want to select, and it's going to select it for you. Okay. Now, when you want to select an IT, that is when you can do this finally. That's where you can put the hash. And also, when you want to select a class, that is when you can now do the group dots colored. And when you want to select a tag name, just pass the tag name like this. Just pass the tag name like this. You don't have to pass anything. And it works like this. So let's say colored, right, equals to document dot query selector like this. So now we want to select dot color. We now do dot colored like this. So we can now finally run dot color dot style dot font style. In fact, let me do that. This time around, I'm going to change the color to gray. Okay, save it. Now, if you go to our page, so this one did not change. We need to, I think this gray, let's use A. That will change it. Okay, still didn't change. This one looks like this one is more powerful. Okay, let's temporarily mute this one and come back. Is it not?
It's,
Okay.
it's from that thing changes the font size, not the color of the text.
So sorry. No, hold on. This one changes to green. But color. Let's check our page. It's fine. Color document no query selector. It's color. Query selector represents an element spider. Okay, sorry, it's not color. I made a mistake here. So it's color. So yeah, I can see it's green. Okay. This spelling is also there's also gray like this, which is also the same thing. So both are just British and American English, which are all saying the same thing. Okay. Sorry, just you know,
49073.
yeah, yeah. I mean anything, please tell me later. Okay, sorry. Now, so we can see that this we just did something simple here. Okay, the same thing we did here. That's because query selector. Now, pay attention to this. This only returns the first element that matches this selector here. You can also do this.
Plus 2349073.
Bring it to public, put it inside screen. Yes, okay. So now, if we have more than one element with this particular selector, that's a class name, it's not going to select all of them. There's one problem with this particular function here. Okay, call it header actually. So now we can also select this H1. Okay? We can also select it, but this time around I have to do hash. Okay, H1 span like this. I will check. So you can see that H1 span is one with the hash color. Okay, you can also select the div. Okay, so now watch what will happen. this is where I want to explain something. So when I do div like this, query selector div, only the first div is going to, so this one is still applying. I want to comment it down. Only the first div is going to inherit that. So now we don't know which one inherited that, or let's say get selected. Let's go, you can't see the one there. But the first div is going to be selected because there are many, so you can say it owns the first element that's in the center of the node that matches the selectors. So for this one, okay, so we are doing color here. It's not color that we want to do. We want to do border. This style border. This, yeah, we are actually doing the wrong thing to see the face. So we save it and then let's. So you can see is if you look at this very well, the top bar, the top bar is only the only one that was selected because that is the one, because this is a tree. So this one is how will I put it? This one is at the top. Okay. So this, I don't know if you guys can see the black border on this top area on top of the navigation section. Okay. So that is what the query selector does. But how do we achieve the same effect here? Sort of get elements by tagging. We want to use query selector. Well, that's where the second query selector comes in. There's also another type of query selector. So we can now do const divs like this equal to document the query selector all. Now, the query selector, look at the difference here. This one is query selector, but this one is query selector all. This one is now going to look for all the elements. Now, this one is a collection. Actually, not a collection. This one returns a collection, HTML collection, right? But this one returns node list, what is known as node list. So the best way to look through this one is to do for each. So you can do divs. Copilot already know what I want to do. So divs dot for each. Now, once again, this dot for each is simply a function that exists on this particular node list. Okay, so the node list is like an object, all right? So it has this method that you can use to access the elements, each of the elements, kind of like a loop, right? We haven't talked about loops in JavaScript. We talk about loops later in the course, right? So it's going to loop through this. Since for each is a loop, a high order loop, okay? It's higher than the for this for let's that we do here. This for loop, this is known as for loop, right? Now this for each is more higher order. So the for each loops through each of the div, and inside of that is going to return you. It takes a callback function. This is an arrow function. If you can remember, this is an arrow function. This part that I have highlighted, right? And then it returns you on each iteration, the current element is going to be represented as this part of parameter that we pass to this anonymous function, which this is another arrow function. So if you don't want to use this arrow function, you can still do it like this function, and it's nothing is wrong. Everything still works the same. Okay. So if you do function d, remember it's an anonymous function. There's no name. So this div represents the div element. You can see HTML div element because it knows the type. Okay. Now inside of this place, we can do whatever we want to do. Now this for each does not return the function, sorry, the element or a new list. That's why I create this callback function, but passes that current element on. That's why it's for each of these. For each, then pass that particular current element to this callback. Now inside of this callback, we can do whatever we want to do to it. Okay. Now if I save this and go to our div, you can see that our page has changed color. All the divs have this light gray color. You can actually do it black. Let's see. Black. So you can see all of them now have this black color, black background. So you can see all our divs have this black background. Do you guys understand this thing we are doing? Do you have any confusion? You have any confusion, any question you can ask? Let's look at it.
I think
okay, you say? What is it?
I'm okay with what you are doing. I'm understanding it.
Okay. What about you, Gloria? I said in the Oh God. I don't know. Is Victoria still with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, so do you have any concern or any question or any confusion?
I don't have any confusion right now, even though I need to like review this on my system so I can. Then, if any questions arise, I'll ask.
Okay, all right, all right. So now these are the ways to select. Now this query selector also, I also want you to know that each of these elements also have their own methods, right? Each of them also have their own methods. Now, for example, when we selected this particular DG, we could actually, maybe there is something inside of it. Let's check if there is anyone that has some kind of G. Okay, let's say here there is a G. So this welcome this key, but all the key inside of this G. You can also select them. So we can also do const P equals to or P P's equals to doc. Now you cannot do div. Now you don't have to do document because when you're doing document, you're still trying to select the ones in directly the descendants of the document. But now we want to select the ones inside of the div. So you cannot do div dot query selector all, right? Because I want to select all the key inside of all the div, right? So we can also do the same thing again, just like more like repeating the same thing. So we now set the color of all the key to blue. And if you go to the page, you can say this one, of course, is blue here. If you scroll down, yeah, you can see this one is blue. So everywhere that is here, I can see that, right? All the keys are now selected as blue. So you can see how we are kind of like programmatically changing what is inside our HTML. Why? If you go to the page, everything remains the same, okay? But in our JavaScript, we are programmatically changing all these dots. So this is it. This is way of selecting elements from our DOM, right? So next, we are going to practice some of these things. Also, we can also create elements dynamically or programmatically, sorry, and insert it directly inside the page without having to put it in our HTML file, right? And to do that, we use document.create element. Do you have anything to say or question to ask? I'm going to comment this so that we can okay. So everything returns back to normal. Yeah, you can see everything just returns back to normal. Okay. I just formatted everything out. Now, if you want to create an element and put this, you can also select by attribute name. And this is how to do that. Document the creator or you can see selecting by attributes.
Plus
So here, give me a minute. Let me collect something from outside.
554552.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so Now, this is also, you can also use the query selector to also select by attribute, not just. So, query selector is like the function to select anything we want by anything. Okay, so we just want to select this just want to select any elements, even by the attribute name, by the ID, by the class, anything. Okay, so this is how we do that. Do you understand that? Nobody's saying anything. So because this example we have here now, select the query selector all, and what we want to select is the amper tag and the attribute. Now you know that this is a way of selecting with attribute. Okay. For example, I can also select by let's say we don't have this let's say for inputs, for inputs, because inputs have types, so we can select all the inputs here. So we can replace the A with inputs, right? The ones that is of I equals text. So we only select the ones that are text. This is also how we do that. Only the inputs that are text. And once again, this is going to font a node list. Okay. So you have to look through this node list and do whatever you want to do. You understand that, right? Not getting any response. Are we still connected? Okay. All right. So I'm going to once again comment this one out. Now, to learn how to create elements, I want us to create a new project. And this time around is going to be a to-do app. Right? This time we start learning by practice. Okay. So here we are going to create a new HTML file. So we can call it do.html. Okay. And of course, press this to get our doc type. I can call it iPockets to do, right? So this is do. You guys remember? Now we are going to close this port. So now we will open a new one to load our application. Let's close that one. So iPocket to do. Now we don't have anything in our page. Let's start adding something to our page. So we first, oh God, what's all this? We first add a header. Okay. So add header like this. Okay. Inside of our header, we'll have our H1. Okay. We have our H. Let's use H2. Okay. Call it iPocket to do. Or let's call it I to do. I to do like this. I to do like this. It's going to be like our app name. So I just want to add a span to add some specs here. And put that I to do. Okay, save it. So you can see our I to do here. I'm going to bring these fonts, fonts. So our font link. So we have to put now. You should know that all your font link is being the same page. Can you guys follow on along while we do this? Because this is really going to help you. Okay. So here we can create a separate CSV file also. We can call it same thing to do dot CS, sorry, not SCSS, CSS. Right, so we can of course use global selector, CSS global selector, and do margin 0, sorry, margin 0. Yeah, this is it. This is what I'm doing. Sizing border post, one family populating, sans yeah, so you do have to refresh. On sunset. But that doesn't seem like it's up. Okay, yes, we have not connected it. Yeah, we have not connected it. So here we have to link it, okay, to do the CSS. Okay, yeah, it's applied now. So in the header, we have this H2. By the right, we are going to have nav, okay. Now, of course, we just have this stuff here. It's not really going to be much, okay. If we check our page, this is it, and then in our to-do, you can come here, select our header, give it a display flex. All right, but flex line items, center, justify content, center. No, justify content space between. You have to space between those contents, so you can see they are spaced. Right, so I can also select the header and nav. So now, let's check what we have there. Yeah, there's nav. Then inside of the nav, there is UL and there is LI. Okay, so you can do this display inline block. Right, so that's fine. We have these perfect. Now we can give up the padding to our, let's call it 10 pixels. Okay, so now we have these 10 pixels, so we can have water bottle 0.1, or just call it 1 pixel, 1 pixel solid. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, now our H2, we have our header, and no, I don't want, it's not a dot. So H2, sorry, H2 and span. Yeah, H2 by the span. Not the only thing I want to apply to it is a color. Just want to give it a different color. Now, our eye span, I don't like it. We choose a very nice color from our color wheel. Something like yeah, I like that color. Right? I like to be. So here, I want to also remove all text decoration none, and also all outline none. Okay, so that's link is going to be that exposure. So we can also use this color as the color of our link. We have to put it outside here. Yeah, like this. I guess this is not gonna fly. So yeah, you can see our font is coming. Now we need to put inputs to have a name. I hope you guys are following along. Are you guys understanding what I'm doing? So here now we can have, okay, so we can have our H1 here and say welcome to I to do and put, let's make it more, let's put a div here and put everything inside of the div. Okay, so we can put a paragraph here. Save, browse, browse and save all your tasks effortlessly. Browser to base to do app. Right. Okay. Now inside our div, we're going to give this a class of center like that. So also our main shouldn't have, now our main should have max width of 50%, 60%, sorry, 60% margin margin author. Yeah, margin author. Okay. Yeah, so margin author is going to center everything in the page. Now, let's give our page a three give it a background. Now, let's just leave that way. So, all the text, center all the text online, center, including the P and the H1. Sorry. Okay, we come to I to do. So, we can actually add this thing that we did here. Okay, can actually do this here. It's welcome to how to do it. So here we just going to create all the outputs. It's just copy from put it in. Instead of header, we use name h1 h1. Okay, so we have that same effect here. All right. So our name, okay, we added auto here. I need to give it a margin top, and 2 arrow here. Okay, that's nice. So the our name TP should not have max width of, let's say, 200 pixels. Just want to check. That's small. 500. Into 500. 500. Yeah, that's nice. So and now use margin author. Center it. Okay. Now, so now we have the input. We need to put the input. Okay. Now we need to put the inputs. So we can put input and type should be text. Placeholder. Oh, let's make it much more nice. Let's put a div there. Div. Then put an input there. We have text. Sorry. Put a placeholder. Placeholder. Enter task. Enter task to save. Right. It's showing here enter task to save. And you have a button, okay, with an ID of save, okay, which will now say save. Okay, now this div will be like input wrapper. Give it a class name input wrapper. Okay, so in our main, we use main just to create specificity. Main dot input wrapper. So we are going to give a margin. We are going to give one REM0. Okay. So now we're going to have a border. Right. So border, so we want it so solid, extremely, right? Border radius. So let's say 5 pixels. Okay. This is it here, 5 pixels. We could, this is taking the full width, yeah. The full width is not too much. So max width is, and just give it a width. Width is 300 or 400 pixels. Yeah, 500 pixels. Also give it margin auto to center everything. Auto. Center everything. Now margin auto has spoiled the margin we have at the top. So in order to do that, so we can put the auto here. Here we go to this place and replace the 0 with auto. And it will be balanced. Yeah, it's balanced. So now also we put overflow hidden. Overflow hidden. Right? Now we use and copy what we have here. Right? And then we put input display lock with 100%. That's it. So now, of course, so we actually have to make this one flex. Align items, center. Yeah, that's enough. So, yeah, everything is balanced now. So we can put, let me put border none here to remove the border change. Border none. So all the borders will be removed. So we now have padding. Let's use 10 pixels. So we can have our input here. Now let's paste this also and have our button. Now the button must be a block. Then padding the same thing, 10 pixels. Let's check. Let's see how it looks. 10 pixels. I'm not sure 10 pixels is good. Let's do it 8 pixels. But 10 pixels. But no. 10 pixels before is okay. But left and right should be like 15 pixels to make sense. So we can make it 20 to make more sense. 20. Yeah. So now we want to change the background. We want to be our primary color. Okay. And our color to be white. Okay, that's it. So now we are coming close to creating an application, but there's something else we need to do. Okay. So here now we want, if we enter a task and the moment we click on save, we enter that task inside our task list. So we want to have a task list container. We can say we can show our list. So we can do this, and now this card list is going to have an ID. Nothing will be inside. No, let me give it a class. Or let me give it an ID. An ID of tasks or task container. Right? So nothing is inside. But we can style it actually. But it has to be hash task container. Now, same thing again. I'm going to give it a border. Let me just remove the border. Oh, yeah, let me give it a border so I will know where it stops. 1 pixel solid to red. Okay. I want the task list to be higher. Wait. Let's give it a weight. Margin of margin. Right, that's nice. So we can now give it a mean height. Mean height of, let's say, 200 pixels. So let's see, yeah, that's nice. So also, I don't need to give it anything. Now I can actually make it display flex, search, line items, center, justify content, center. Okay. So now if you put something, let's say no task at the moment, put something like P, no tasks. Sorry, no tasks. No tasks available. So we can see it like this, no tasks available. Now we can use our no tasks available to, we can actually create this like this. And I want to select the P and give the color of gray. So I'm going to give it an ID of not as P, just like that. That doesn't say. This has to do this. Still not color key at P. Then task container. Okay. ID. That one, anyway, it's supposed to work. But this still didn't work. Sorry. Oh my God. We're not supposed to put that ash there. So let me decrease it a bit. So, yeah, no task available. So now we can remove this border, right? So we can see no task available. Now let's work on our task list. So when we have a task list, we start it here using UL and LI, right? Now our LI is going to have our LI is going to have let's say P with task name. We just call it task name, right? And the button I will say delete, remove. One will say delete, one will say mark complete. Mark complete. Mark complete. Okay, so now, so let me probably comment this one so I can have what I'm looking for. Now our I, that's the UL. So we need to select this again. Put it here. Our UL has to have weight 100%. Okay, that's nice. So now our ULLI has to have display block. Sorry, not block, flex. Align items center. Justify content space between. Okay, so that there will always be space between the contents. Now let me check the border. Border 1 pixel. So see where, okay. Space between. Why is there this space here? Okay. I think you can fix that. ULLIP weight 100%. Okay, 800% and check the border of the border 1 on the. Okay, so text align left. Oh, that's nice. So because the text align was inherited from somewhere else, so we're having issues. Now remove that color so we can have one. Now in our to-do list, this button has to be in T. Okay, it has to be in a D. Yeah, so that D, you can target that D. Please start collecting inside of that LI. Okay, you can target the D and still copy this. For this one, we don't have to put online space. Just leave the specify content. I just put that. Let's say 10 pixels. Right. And then then we select the button directly inside the page. Can actually use display flex. Let's see how it's going to work. That is not gonna work. I want to start that. Let me first of all provide the text. 7 pixel, 10 pixel. Okay, add the words. Display block. White space. So we use white space and put new wrap to stop it from wrapping. So you can see we have prevented that wrapping. right? So you can border radius 5 pixels. Okay. Now, um, now you can select the end child. Child. Each child. One. Background. Courage. Yeah. Color white. Okay. And duplicate this. Duplicate this and change this from type hash to the color. Sorry, this is child 2. Child 2, yeah. So now we have this. You can now remove this border we have on the LI. Right, so we now have this here. Right. Okay. Now let's create or let's add interaction to do app, whereby we are going to add we are going to be adding a list. So this time around, this is a good opportunity for us to test our to do. So you can see we quickly designed this application, right? So how do we do that? First of all, we give our input an ID. Okay? We give it an ID of, let's say, input. Okay? So that we can select that. Now our LI, okay. Now our no task is going to be selected, right? Then our LI is also going to be for tasks. Okay? But I'm going to give it an ID, not a class. But it's going to be empty. So I'm going to copy this, or in fact, comment it out, right? So I don't have anything there. So you can see we have this new tasks. Now this our task container, right? So first of all, go to our JavaScript. I think we have to create a new to-do.js. Then in our to-do, we can link it inside our body. We use the script. Source is going to be to-do.js. So now let's select our task. Right. So actually, let's select our P, the one with the P. So instead of our to do, you can say const P equals the document period select. No, not period select. Get element and ID. Right. You just put it P. Okay. So initially, want to check for lists. So you can say const tasks. Task list equals to an array. So we can now check if, so in order for us to check, so we want to, when this list is empty, we show no tasks available, otherwise we don't show it. So in order for us to do that, we now check here, immediately program runs, we now check if task list of length equals 0. So we want to change the size of that list, then we want to p dot style dot display equals none, like this. I can see the moment I say that p has disappeared, right? If it is not equal to this, then otherwise else we have to put the s, because sometimes when the list changes, there's no way we can try that. So we can otherwise set it to block. Okay, that's nice. So the next one we need to track now is URL, right? So we have to select const tasks, task container equals documents. Oh God, documents dot get element by ID And once again, we call it tasks, right? Task container, that is our tasks. So actually, yes, that's it. So here now, we need to take this. Now there's something else we need. Now this button that's got saved, we need to select it again because we need that button. So that button is what we need to attach an action to. So we can say save the button like this. Because document dot get element by ID, and the name is save. Okay. Now, in fact, let's attach an action to that button. Now, pay attention. This is where things gets really interesting. So, to add an action like click to this button, I'm clicking on it, but nothing is happening. I'm clicking on this button, but nothing is happening. So, in order to add an action, there are various ways, but the best way you can do save button dot on click. Okay, on click like this, right? Because you now put the function you want to do. But the most modern way you should always do it is to use add event listener. And you do that by when you call the element, you now do add event listener because everything that happens on the page, any action that happens is an event. Okay, anything that happens, including changes, are events. So the type of event is what you specify to event listening. So when you use a string to give it the name, the type of event. Here we want to listen for click. Okay, click, and then the add event listener also is another function that exists on this object. So we call it, and then it helps us to attach event listener, or will I say help us to attach an action to that particular element. And you first of all specify the type of action. Here we are saying click. Then the next argument we are going to pass is the function that's going to run each time that particular event occurs. So each time you click, this function will be executed or to be called or to be run. So, and it's usually you can create it outside or you can create it directly here. So I can create it outside and pass it here as a reference, or I can just use anonymous function. So I can just do function like this, right? And then like this. So, but here's the thing, just like how we saw on that for each method, this function also passes that particular event to the anonymous function. So this event can accept E. So this E becomes the event. So you can see pointer events, okay? Because this is a click, so it's called pointer events, okay? So now this event, sometimes you might need it, sometimes you may not need it. For example, if this button is inside of a form, remember when a button is inside of a form, when you click it, it attempts to submit that form. So here is where you can programmatically prevent that behavior. And the way to do that is report e.prevent defaults like this. Once you do this prevents the prevent method prevent default method of the event interface tells the user agent that if the event does not get explicitly handled, if the action should not be taken as it normally would be. So this is how you prevent that. But here we don't need to prevent any of that, right? But what I want to do is that whenever I click this, I want it to alert and tell me you clicked this button like this. Let me put an exclamation mark there, right? So watch now. Before I was clicking not happen, but when I click now, you can see you click this button. I'm going to close that. Click again. You click this button. Can you see what's happening? Okay. Now I can do anything I want inside of this function right here. I can do any single thing I want, right? Yes, Victoria.
I can't see your screen. I don't know if it's just me or if it's
Okay, Bishop, can you see my screen? Let me confirm this if it's from my end.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
It's so Victoria, I don't know if you can just is it your network or you can just leave and join immediately so that the issue can be resolved.
Let me try. Let me do that.
All right. Okay, so now you can see that when I click on sorry, where is that browser? So when I click on this button, something happens. See, an action happened. In fact, this button okay, can you see your screen now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So what I was saying is that when I click on this button, you can see that that action is performed. Okay. Each time it's so it has the action has been attached to that button. So no matter what, it will always execute each time I click on it. Can you see that, right? So now what I want to do is that when I'm typing something into this input, I want it, I want when I click on save, it's going to save that task. Okay. And how do I do that? Well, here is where I can perform all that operation. Now, first of all, I need to select the inputs that we have because the inputs, I gave it an ID of input. So because the input is what I need to get the value from. So now I can say const input equals document dot get element by ID. Sorry, element by ID, and the ID is input. Okay. Now here, let me show you. I can actually do, when I click on this, I can actually do input alert. Sorry, that alerts. Instead of doing this, instead of this alert, I want to get the value from this input. And the way to get this value, let me get first of all, get it here. So I want to get the value of the input element. This is the input. Now, here's how to get the value of the input. So I can now say input, sorry, I can call it the value, like the response value equals inputs dot value. Okay. Now I can now do alert. I'm not sure that it's valid. Alert value. Okay. I save it. So if I click, because nothing is here, but let's type something. This is test. I'm just clicking it again. So you can see that, right? This is test. So I'm now getting the input here. I'm passing it to the alert to log it. But next thing we want to do is not to alert the input, but instead we want to add it to the list. Okay. Now, this list we created here, we want to attach different what is it called? We want to attach different oh god, I forgot. Okay, we want to attach the li each time the button is clicked. Okay, now there's a problem, there's something with it here. If this is non is it is less than one, this is actually what it's supposed to do. So if it is greater than 0, okay, so now it should show us this, and task container dot style dot display equals none. No, but here it will just show no here. No. So yeah, so you can see that our no tags are available. So whenever we type something, we want to save it as soon as we click on this place. Okay, sorry, that was the wrong stuff. So now we have gotten this value. What do we do? Well, we have to create this element each time, this li element, each time we execute that function, and then append it to this task container, right? And how do we do that? First of all, we create the li. So you can say const li equals to documents dot create elements. So the create element is actually going to create an element. Now we pass the name of the element is li, right? Now we can now append. Now li dot append. Now here we can now append elements to this li. So this is what we want to append. This here and this, right? So I'm going to copy this and paste as a string. But there's a problem if I paste it as a string. I'm going to paste it like this as a string, right? Then task container, sorry, task container dot dot append child, append, yeah, dot append. You're going to append li, right? Right. So each time I will type this is test and press, so nothing happened. Nothing happened. Why is there nothing happened? But that's because this place now we are still displaying this to be empty, right? So how do we fix this problem? So we actually have to check here. So okay, sorry, we haven't done something here. So we have to first of all add this value to the list first. So that's list dot dot keep up. That's list dot shift. Let's use shift and then use put value. Okay, so let's see. We need to add that list. So added it. So let's create a function that performs this. This is because this thing is running once. We have to create a function that will always check. Let's call it checklist. Okay. Call it a checklist function, and then paste this thing here inside. So what will happen is that we'll call that checklist immediately, and then after doing this thing, we'll also call checklist here. Okay. So for now, just put something here. It's nothing is happening. Why is there nothing happening? So let's also log this. Log pass list. Let's check what's happening. So we go to also nothing happened. So let's add something else and click on it. We'll still get empty. So that is because this is not working. Let's just check what the shift. Remove. Okay, this is on shift, not shift. And shift is going to add. Sorry, I was using shift removes it. Right, so you can see, yes, that's nice. So now this adds a string to it, but this is not what we want to do actually. We want to actually append HTML. So how do we do that? We create another. We have to be creating div again. You have to create a div because the document creates the same facts. Let me duplicate this thing. We have to do this multiple times. Okay, so here we are creating a div and for this one a div, right? And then here we are going to create a button, actually a paragraph, call it paragraph. Should be this, right? And then here we create button one, right? And create another button again, button two, right? So this will be a button as well, right? And this one will also be a button, right? Now we now do first before we append this. So we actually have to append div directly here, right? First of all, we append the paragraph. You append the para because this one accepts a list of, so we can append para and div. But here, div is going to also append div dot append. It's also going to take this to button two, like this. Okay, then now it can properly sync what we have. So let's check. So if we type it, so you can see that we are getting it, even though, and if you keep on typing it, we keep on, but nothing is inside those contents. That's because we haven't added the value. So how do we do that? So here we can do our para, because paragraph is the one does text contents, we set it to be the value of value. Okay. Now, if you notice, we haven't actually used this task list array. Okay, I will show you why. Right. But for now, let's do how we normally do it as a newbie. So now we created this. If you save and type something here, when we click on add, you can see that this is text. If I add something again, another test, another test, add it again. So you can see we keep on adding and adding and adding and adding. It's going to be added, right? Now for the buttons, we have to specify their text contents. Okay, so we have to do button 1, button 1 dot text contents equals to delete like this, something like that, right? Same thing, button 2 got to say the mark complete, right? Mark complete. Then that's when we have that complete design we have before. So you can see it now. I want to test something new and save. We have, so we need to style in our styling, we need to do something more. So this actually have to add margin, let's say 10 pixels 0. Okay, so you can see that space here, a little bit of spacing. Maybe we can make it 20, or we can actually do, you can actually add some demarcation there that will make the UI better. Okay, not in last child, border bottom 1 pixel solid hash like this. So we have to add in that case 10 pixels 0 like that. So yeah, we can start little demarcation on the bottom. So later I will improve the code. Now, so far, the code we are writing is not very efficient. Okay, improve the code. You can save it. So you can see as we are adding, and everything is adding to the bottom, right? Now, this is one way to create this list. But so far, what we have here is too long. I mean, we are creating and all we are running all these commands in order to append something. But there's a better way to do all these things. And what's the better way? Well, the better way is after creating this list, we can actually use what is called insert adjacent HTML. So I can do li.insert adjacent, insert adjacent HTML, not elements, HTML. And this simply takes a string. So I can go and copy this thing that I commented here and paste it inside of this place, right? Now I don't need all this bullshit here. Okay, I don't need them. I'm going to now remove all these things. Okay, save. Now, of course, when I click something, let's say, even if I type text, it will append that. Start adjusting HTML, append li. What's next? I'm not getting something. This part is not executed. So let's see what is happening. Something is happening now. So let's check the console. Must be okay. First to execute insert HTML element. 2 arguments required, but only found. Okay, yes. So the insert adjacent HTML requires 2 arguments, but we only specify 1. So the first one is actually the position, and then the last one is the element, which is a string like this. So before this one, we have to pass the position. Okay, so we have to pass the position. So we are going to use after begin, save it like this. So now it's going to work. Our application will not crash again. So I can type something and save. So you can see it. But the truth is that we are not updating what is there. So as you're typing, we have more and more lists. Okay. Now, this method we are using so far, in order to update those real data, I simply have to pass the value here, right? Pass the value here as value using template literal. I don't need to discuss about template strings. Okay, so this is all I need to do, and that's all. So if I do this, as it. If I choose something, updating code soon, updating code soon, and save. See everything now. You can see that we have the lesser code. So this function has performed all those bulky operations that we were doing before for us. Just pass where we want to insert this adjacent HTML. So it passes this string to a valid HTML code and then saves it. Okay, let me make this more readable. Okay, yeah, so this is it. Now all these values, of course, can be added here. Now, but how do we remove items? So far, when we add, for example, if I add this list, also we want to clear this value when we immediately save. How do we do that? Well, after adding everything and saving, at the end, we now do impute dot value equals to empty string like this. Okay, so let's try it out. We are setting the value to be empty string at the end. So see, you can see now the empty, the input is now empty. You see, notice that updating code soon. So it becomes empty. So you can type anything you want to type without having to delete what was inside. Right? So why do we need this array that we created called task? Well, that's to implement these deletes. We can actually do that without having to have the, but we can actually do it in another way though. Another way we can do it is this. Okay, so we have to attach a function to this delete button here using onClick. So instead of this string, we have to ask it. Let me show you what it means here. Inside of this place, right? I'm going to uncomment this one again. Right now, this button also accepts what is called onClick, like this. OnClick, and then the onClick is a parameter that's so a pointing device button that has been pressed and released in an element. So onClick will execute what you want it to execute. Of course, we no longer need this here. We have already taken it outside, so we can make our HTML a little smaller. So here we can pass that onClick, okay, directly here, and we set it to be equal to a particular function. That function must be inside a string. So we can create a function here inside of this function. It doesn't matter. Okay. Now we can create that function either below or above. Okay. But the best way to do this is when we click on, for example, when we click on that delete button, we want to filter the list we have based on the ID of this particular item and remove it. I think that's what we are going to learn later because we have already exhausted our time. So if you guys have any question, later we're going to implement deleting in our to-do list so that we can learn how to also use the manipulation to update what is on the page. So far we have been able to, and also we notice that when we save or when we refresh, all our items are gone. For example, if I add this item here and I save the browser, it is gone. But that's not what we want. We want to make it easy. Even after closing this browser and come back, open this page, we should see all our lists listed here. Our tasks, sorry. So we are going to also learn how to do that, all right, using what is called local storage. So do you guys have any questions? Solomon, do you Solomon, so do you have any question? Sorry, Bishop. Bishop, do you have any question?
No,
I don't have any questions. So do you understand everything that I explained?
I did not really understand everything that was doing.
And you say you don't have a question.
Yes, now the reason is because at some point, like I was so tired, so I even slept off during the whole at some point. So by getting the to do, I just came and met it when it happened.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you.
you guys see at some point, like I was tired, so I slept off during the class, like during the creation of the whole to do codes, like whatever the to do app. I was not even active during that process. I just woke up to saw that it has been created.
Okay. So what you will do is that you have to go through the class again so that you can understand what you've done, right? But if you have any question, bring it in the next class, okay? All right. Do you understand me?
Yes.
You heard me, right? Okay. All right then. All right, guys, let's call it a night then. See you guys in the next class, okay? All right.